Katsuki swallowed his coffee, enjoying the warmth of the beverage, if not the flavor.
"This place has shitty coffee,"
he commented. Matsumoto stood behind him, staring into the depths of his own cup of coffee like he was expecting it to drink itself or something. "It is rather bitter," the alpha agreed.
"It's more than just bitter,"
Bakugou countered.
"It's got no richness or depth to it, just bitter and sour."
The distinguished scarecrow pushed his glasses up on his nose a little and sighed. "True." Bakugou drained his cup and sighed.
"At least it has caffeine."
He muttered and poured himself another cup before moving across the room again, pointedly taking himself as far away from yesterday's corner as was physically possible.
"I owe you for yesterday,"
he said finally, glancing back over his shoulder at the tall, slender alpha trailing behind him. Matsumoto's eyebrows jumped upwards in surprise. "How so?" he asked. Bakugou set his coffee down on a small table and plopped into the chair beside it, nodding his head at the two chairs across from him.
"You watched out for me yesterday after that happened,"
he said, avoiding Matsumoto's gaze, instead picking up his coffee again and staring down at it.
"You kept any other alphas away and stayed with me so the staff wouldn't get pissed at me for not socializing. You didn't have to do that, but you did."
"You're wrong," Matsumoto said carefully, his voice brittle like he was trying hard not to snap. "I did have to do that. I couldn't forgive myself for just leaving you alone like that. I can't imagine leaving anyone in such a vulnerable state. It wasn't a choice. I had to do it." He reached out, gently brushing his long fingers over Katsuki's bandaged knuckles. "I just wish I'd arrived sooner," he said softly. Katsuki pressed his lips together to trap the whine that was building in his throat. What the fuck was wrong with him? His body seemed ready to throw itself at literally any alpha who showed him the slightest bit of attention. He didn't want to feel like this. Didn't want his skin to feel every light touch of an alpha like it was a direct link to his out-of-control libido. "Sorry if I'm interrupting, but actually I'm not that sorry," came a voice from behind him. "Bakugou, are you alright?" Fucking Kirishima was hovering behind him now. Katsuki resisted the urge to groan as his body redoubled its efforts to reach a state of arousal. Across from him, Matsumoto stood smoothly, his shoulders bunching with tension. "And you are?" he growled, his voice dipping into a deeper register that sent a shiver down Katsuki's spine. Fucking hell, could his stupid instincts not do this to him for 5 damn seconds? Was that too much to fucking ask? "I'm Kirishima," the red-haired alpha responded with surprising calm. "You're not the asshole I met earlier, and Bakugou seems to be okay with you, so I'm going to assume you're a decent guy." Matsumoto glanced between Bakugou and Kirishima, uncertainty playing across his features for a moment before he relented, once more taking a seat. "I apologize," he said stiffly. "I wasn't sure who you were or whether Bakugou was comfortable with your presence." Except that Katsuki wasn't comfortable with Kirishima's presence, because the man had refused him earlier and was obviously only here out of a sense of obligation.
"Fuck off, shitty hair,"
Katsuki told him tiredly, glancing up at his friend. "I don't think I will," Kirishima replied, settling into the second chair across from him. He glanced down at Katsuki's cup and grimaced. "I can't believe you're actually drinking that," he said.
"I don't have any other options,"
Katsuki shot back snidely, but he set the cup down anyway. "I'll bring your filters and usual blend with me tomorrow," Kirishima assured him. "Oh yeah, while we're on the subject of bringing things, Arakaki mentioned something about you thinking the shampoo smells terrible. Did you want me to grab yours from your apartment, or I could just bring you some of mine?" Katsuki hated the way his chest bloomed with warmth at Kirishima's eagerness to help. His alpha,
"Not your alpha, get a fucking grip,"
wanted to provide for him, would even let him use his own shower supplies. It felt protective, like Kirishima was showing Katsuki that he knew him, knew him well enough to give him what he needed.
Except for sex.
Katsuki reminded himself glumly.
He doesn't fucking want you, remember? He's just a good person, that's all.
Matsumoto's face was bright red as he glanced between Katsuki and Kirishima, finally clearing his throat and saying awkwardly, "I'm sorry, I thought Bakugou was a mandatory resident." Kirishima turned to look at him, confused. "What are you talking about? He is a mandatory resident." Matsumoto gaped at Kirishima. "How is that possible?" he finally managed. "When the two of you are obviously incredibly familiar with each other."
"It's obvious if you think about it,"
Bakugou said sharply.
"We haven't fucked."
Matsumoto looked appropriately mortified by his use of coarse language. Katsuki found a bit of vindictive pleasure in causing that reaction. "Oh," Matsumoto said weakly, his forehead creasing with confusion. "Then why is he here?" Katsuki looked at Kirishima and raised an eyebrow.
"Why, indeed?"
he sneered.
"You gonna fuck me, Kirishima?"
Kirishima's face was almost as red as his hair. He wheezed a little, his fingers digging into the arms of his overstuffed chair. "Oh, I mean..." He tossed a worried look in Matsumoto's direction, and Katsuki could practically see his friend's mind whirling, trying to figure out what would happen if he didn't fuck Katsuki. Would Matsumoto do it instead? "Maybe later," he squeaked. Matsumoto was giving Kirishima a strange look, like he wasn't sure how to react to such a weak-ass response. "I hope you know, Bakugou, if you are seeking a partner for your heat, I would be more than happy to oblige," Matsumoto informed Katsuki, shooting another glance in Kirishima's direction like he wasn't sure if the alpha beside him was going to take offense to that or not. As it turned out, Kirishima very much took offense. "You creepy bastard," he snarled, whirling on Matsumoto so fast the other alpha barely had time to blink before Kirishima's fists were clutching his collar, shaking the other alpha roughly. "He's still dealing with shit because of some disgusting alpha's inappropriate behavior, and you would just take advantage of that?" Kirishima sounded utterly repulsed by the idea. "I swear, you lay so much as a pinky on him." A low growl erupted from his throat. "You'll answer to me." Katsuki had seen enough.
"Holy fucking shit, Kirishima,"
he snapped, leaning forward.
"It's not enough that you won't mate me, now you're going to fucking cock-block me too. What the hell?"
Kirishima dropped Matsumoto's collar and looked at Katsuki, his eyes pleading. "Give me time, please," he said. "I just need to figure out..."
"You won't fucking mate me, and you don't want anyone else to mate me,"
Katsuki snarled.
"What is there to figure out?"
Matsumoto was glancing back and forth between the two of them, surreptitiously straightening his collar. "If Bakugou wanted to mate me, I'd do it in a heartbeat," he said simply. "Perhaps the reason you're not ready is that you're not interested in..." "Hey, buddy." Kirishima turned to Matsumoto so swiftly that Katsuki only caught the briefest glimpse of murder in his friend's eyes. "How about you shut the hell up about shit you know nothing about?" It wasn't a request, more of a threat. Kirishima was shaking with barely restrained fury, his fists clenched tightly, and Katsuki could see Kirishima's hardening quirk ripple intermittently across his fist as the red-haired man fought to control his temper. "Something awful was done to Bakugou, and the last thing I want to do is hurt him more by jumping into shit too quickly." Kirishima stabbed his index finger into Matsumoto's chest, eliciting a grunt of pain from the bespectacled alpha. "So maybe back off with this shit implying that because I care about him enough to figure shit out before mating him, I must not be interested enough. I'm plenty interested, I just have self-control too. Which is, incidentally, the only reason I'm not kicking your goddamn ass right now." Katsuki had to admit, watching Kirishima hulk out on another alpha for daring to suggest that he wasn't interested went a long way towards assuring him that maybe his friend really was interested. Maybe he did have other reasons for refusing Bakugou's advances. It was still shitty. Bakugou should be allowed to make those kinds of decisions for himself, not have them dictated to him by Kirishima. But at least he was starting to wonder if maybe Kirishima didn't mind the fact that he was an Omega.
So you're okay with me being an Omega then?
Katsuki asked Kirishima. The red-haired alpha turned from Matsumoto to face him, his eyes wide and expressive. The only thing that's not okay is that I made you believe I had a problem with Omegas in the first place, he said earnestly. I'm so sorry. Matsumoto looked very confused. You have a problem with Omegas? Do you prefer Betas or something? I don't have a problem with Omegas, Kirishima growled, turning so his body was placed partially between Katsuki and Matsumoto. Every line of his body seemed to scream mine. I am confused, Matsumoto confessed. Bakugou, did you want me to stay, or are you comfortable with... Matsumoto sniffed disdainfully. Him. The way Matsumoto said him very clearly demonstrated how he felt about Kirishima.
It's fine,
Katsuki told him, making a shooing motion with his hand. Kirishima settled back in his chair, watching Matsumoto go with a wrinkled nose. He seems nice, he finally managed. I don't think he likes me. Katsuki resisted the urge to roll his eyes, picking up his coffee and taking a sip. Ugh.
He's had an eye on me since day one,
Katsuki told him, then sniggered into his cup.
He knows when he's outclassed, though.
Yeah, well, anyone could see you're dealing with a lot of crap, and taking advantage of that just to get in your pants. It's super unmanly, Kirishima declared, his nose wrinkling a little more in the direction Matsumoto had gone. Anyone with a sense of justice would outclass him. Katsuki blinked.
Is that why you won't do me?
He hissed.
Because you think I'm weak? That I'm some delicate fucking flower who doesn't know how to say no when he's had a bad day?
Kirishima just turned to stare at Katsuki, disappointment in his eyes, until Katsuki found himself backing down voluntarily.
Fine, fine. I know you don't actually think I'm weak or any of that shit, but seriously.
Katsuki glowered at him.
You won't mate me, but you don't want anyone else to do it either. It's kind of bullshit.
Kirishima made a face. You threw your clothes away yesterday, he said. You broke the wall. That's not you. Not unless you were really upset. Katsuki swallowed hard. He hadn't realized Kirishima would go through his room if he left him in there.
Am I not entitled to privacy?
Katsuki snapped, then sighed, staring down into his coffee cup. The eyes reflected in the coffee looked tired. He didn't have the energy for another fight with Kirishima. He glanced back up at the stupid-haired idiot with a sigh. Forget it. I knocked the can over when I was leaving, so I saw the clothes when I shoved them back inside. Kirishima explained, giving him a disappointed look. I wasn't trying to violate your privacy. But even without seeing that or the wall, you're still acting different. Plus, you're so... Kirishima gestured abstractly. Fixated on mating. Do you really need it that badly? Or something else may be affecting your judgment? Katsuki wanted to tell Kirishima that he was always fixated on the thought of having sex with him. But that wasn't entirely true. His whole body had gotten strange after Adachi's attentions.
That alpha from the parlor messed me up by playing with my mating gland and tricking me into dropping my suppressant dose for the day,
Bakugou told him, carefully avoiding any mentions of what else Adachi had done.
I guess that combination made me more, how'd you put it, fixated, yeah. A lot more fixated on mating.
Katsuki shrugged. So we did something to your mating gland. Kirishima mused, tapping the end of his index finger to his top lip, forehead creased in a thoughtful frown. Katsuki resisted the urge to laugh. Kirishima wasn't exactly a deep thinker, and asking him to consider anything complicated was something of an exercise in futility. He was the type of person who charged into a situation headlong, hit and get hit. Those were his two duties in most of their hero work, and he did it well. Strategy and problem solving were not really in his job description, and with good reason. Kirishima was fucking terrible at that shit.
That doesn't change the fact that I want to mate, even if it is a result of that asshole's manhandling. I'd still rather feel you on my skin than him.
Katsuki told Kirishima. Kirishima's frown deepened. Do you think that feeling you talked about, like he's still touching you, is it getting better or worse? Katsuki didn't want to think about that. He'd rather forget it entirely, but it was a fair question. He closed his eyes and shuddered as a phantom caress slithered along his neck.
Fuck.
He cursed, eyes flying open.
Shit.
He looked up to see Kirishima leaning forward, hovering nervously. He waved him away with a sigh.
About the same,
he said.
It was getting worse the last day or so, but it's been the same since the parlor this morning.
Kirishima nodded seriously. Maybe he found a way to override your suppressants, he guessed. Katsuki growled lowly.
I already fucking told you, it's not my heat.
Kirishima hummed noncommittedly, glancing at his watch. It's almost lunchtime, he noted, clumsily changing the subject. Since Katsuki didn't want to talk about Adachi any more than Kirishima did, he let it happen without comment. Kirishima glanced at Katsuki. You hungry? Katsuki wasn't really hungry, but it would be a change of scenery at least. Then again, he was still pissed that Kirishima didn't believe him when he said this wasn't his heat. Pissed enough that he wasn't about to make things easy for the redhead.
I'm not hungry,
he told Kirishima.
I can't even finish this swill,
he added, lifting his coffee cup to show Kirishima how much was left. Oh, okay. Let me know when you get hungry then. Kirishima replied with more cheer than Katsuki really felt the situation warranted. The redhead frowned a moment later as he remembered something. We can't go between 2 and 5, though, since those are your afternoon reserve visitation hours, and the code of conduct says those can't be spent in the dining hall. Katsuki's blood ran cold. He hadn't even considered the fact that Kirishima's presence wouldn't actually have any bearing on his schedule. Of course, he still had reserve visitations. He was an idiot to think otherwise. Fuck. What if Adachi requested him again? Kirishima wouldn't be able to do shit about it, and Katsuki would have to endure, knowing that Kirishima knew he was letting some asshole touch him. Oh god, that was so fucking much worse than any other thing that might happen. His chest hurt. He couldn't breathe. Adachi still had him under his thumb. Shit. How the fuck was he going to last through another 4 days of hell, and knowing that Kirishima was right there made it that much worse?
Fucking damn it.
He didn't want Kirishima to worry about him, and if Kirishima was already having second thoughts about mating, watching Adachi get all physical would probably turn him off entirely. His ears were ringing. His fingertips prickled like they were going numb. His throat felt tight, like he was choking on each breath and he couldn't seem to get enough fucking air. He was dizzy. His heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Something warm and comforting caught his shaking hands and gripped them tight. Bakugou. Hey, Bakugou. Kirishima was gently surrounding Katsuki's hands with his own, eyes fixed on his face, concern radiating off of him like a heat from a stove. Dimly, Katsuki noticed his cup of coffee lying on the floor, the dark liquid fanning out from where the drink had been dropped.
Fuck,
he breathed.
I forgot he could still request.
No one is requesting you, Kirishima interrupted sharply. That's the first thing I did when I left your room. All of your reserve visitations today and tomorrow are with me. No one else is getting near you without your permission, and no staff people are going to dare interfere because I'll be right here with you the whole damn day. Bakugou slumped in relief.
Oh,
he said lamely. His hands were still shaking, but Kirishima held them tight so no one else would notice. His gaze drifted back to the coffee he'd dropped.
I should clean that up.
I'll get some napkins, Kirishima offered. Want me to bring you a new cup while I'm over there?
Hell no. The swill this place calls coffee is fucking disgusting.
Kirishima chuckled. Yeah, it is. He agreed, patting Katsuki's hand gently before popping to his feet and moving off in search of napkins. Kirishima decided that even if Bakugou didn't want coffee, he could use a cup of something warm to soothe his own nerves. He hadn't seen Bakugou panic like that in at least 9 months, maybe even longer. The last time had been because of bad intel from dispatch, and the building they'd been evacuated had nearly crushed Ichiro and 20 civilian victims after Bakugou had mistakenly taken out a support wall in a bid to catch the escaping villain. He'd been white as a ghost when Red Riot had finally emerged from the rubble. Ichiro hadn't gotten blamed for the incident. After all, accidents happened. Bad information sometimes got passed along, and a quirk like Bakugou's could very easily create problems if he didn't have all the necessary data to make informed decisions when pursuing a villain. Ichiro poured himself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. He took a calming breath, grabbed a fistful of napkins, and turned to head back to where Bakugou was waiting. His friend was staring down at the coffee cup he'd dropped, hands clasped firmly together, resting between his knees. His eyes were dull, and his shoulders sagged like he was exhausted. There was a line of tension in how he held himself, though, and something about how he sat screamed discomfort, at least as someone who knew Bakugou as well as Ichiro did. For not the first time, Ichiro imagined what he would have done to that awful alpha if he hadn't sworn to himself that he could stick to the code of conduct. Probably something that would get his hero license suspended pending further investigation. Hence why he was trying his hardest to follow the code of conduct to the letter. He eased into one of the seats across from Bakugou, setting down his coffee and dropping the napkins onto the spill, bending over to wipe it up. Bakugou's hand joined his a moment later, and the two of them mopped up the spilled drink in silence. Ichiro tucked the dirty napkins into the cup, mentally thanking the universe that the ceramic hadn't broken when it hit the floor.
So,
Bakugou said as Ichiro set the cup full of wet napkins aside.
You reserved all of the visitations?
Of course, Kirishima told him. He'd gotten lost coming down from Bakugou's room, and when he'd stopped to ask a staff person for directions, it had occurred to him that the alpha creep might have tried for another reserve visitation. So he'd asked to go to the front desk and forked over the cash to reserve all of the day's visits and tomorrow's. He'd wanted to reserve every day, but the receptionist had informed him that the reservations could only be booked 1 day in advance. He figured he would just have to remember to reserve the next day's visitations when he arrived each morning.
You gonna do anything with those visitations?
Bakugou asked, raising an eyebrow.
You know, they can be taken in a room, not just the parlor,
he added with a leer. It was really unfair how damn attractive Bakugou looked when he said things like that, his eyes raking up and down Ichiro with undisguised delight. Coughing to hide the fact that he'd been rendered momentarily speechless by Bakugou's molten gaze, Ichiro tried to figure out how to respond to that. He still didn't want to hurt Bakugou, but what his friend had said earlier resonated with him. Even if his fixation on mating was caused by that alpha, Bakugou still wanted to feel Ichiro, and not that creeper, on his skin. Ichiro could respect that desire, to an extent anyway. Whatever you want, he finally managed, although that wasn't precisely accurate. Bakugou was quick on the uptake, though.
Whatever I want, unless it's sex.
Bakugou shot back with a scowl. Oh my god, Ichiro was not strong enough to keep having this conversation. It was going to break him. I don't want that right now, he stressed. But anything else is on the table. Bakugou leaned back, his eyes narrowing as he stared at Ichiro calculatingly. Oh shit, he knew that look. His blonde friend was looking for a loophole.
Anything else?
He parroted Ichiro's words back at him. Swallowing hard, Kirishima nodded.
So define sex for me, then,
Bakugou said, a slow smile creeping across his face.
Would that be any penetrative act, or just nodding?
Oh god, Ichiro could tell by the burning sensation alone that his face was bright red. He was such a virgin when it came to talking about this sort of thing. How the hell was Bakugou so chill about it when he'd apparently been filling out deferred mating paperwork for just as long as Ichiro? He said intelligently, then fumbled for an answer. I guess I mostly just want to wait before nodding, so kissing or whatever is...
What about oral?
Bakugou interrupted.
I want to suck your dick.
Shit. How could he just say that with a straight face? Kirishima thought he was going to melt into a puddle from the burning heat of his embarrassment. I guess... He squeaked, like he'd suddenly fallen backwards in time to the awkward stage of puberty where his voice refused to cooperate. If you really wanted to do that, Ichiro was going to die.
What about handjobs?
Bakugou continued, as if he were casually commenting on the weather and not talking about lewd activities in a very public space.
Or, would you finger me if I wanted that?
That's it. Ichiro was officially dead. His brain had ceased to function. Someone called the coroner. He was basically ready for cremation at this point. He said, and then valiantly fighting to say something, he added, if you want me to do that, yes, I guess. Bakugou folded his arms carefully over his chest.
Would you give me oral?
Holy shit, his face was on fire. If you want. A satisfied smirk crossed Bakugou's features.
So, besides nodding and bonding, basically anything else is on the table.
He summarized, anticipation flickering in his crimson gaze. Ichiro swallowed hard. I guess, but can we please take it slow? Katsuki scowled, though his eyes glinted with devious intent.
Fine.
He stood, and Ichiro was about to mirror his actions when Bakugou sat down again, settling down comfortably on Kirishima's lap. He leaned in, burying his nose in the crook of Ichiro's neck and inhaling deeply. He hummed quietly, then said,
I've wanted to do this for fucking years.
Ichiro nearly vibrated out of his skin when Bakugou followed up that statement with a soft kiss to the point where his jaw met his throat, and then pressed his own neck closer, rubbing it against Ichiro's with a groan. The contact released a burst of scent from Bakugou that left Ichiro's brain scrambling to form coherent thought. Everything was spicy and rich and earthen, and it smelled so damn good. Ichiro groaned. He'd smelled Bakugou before, but it was always so much more subtle than this. Buried deep beneath the suppressants and scent neutralizers they'd been using since the beginning of high school. Kirishima wished he could reciprocate, but in addition to his rut blocker, he'd taken scent neutralizers because he hadn't expected to want to seduce any of the Omegas at this heat house. What a mistake that had been, because now his instincts were screaming at him to release his own scent, and he had no real way of doing so. He groaned again. Damn it, he said, his mouth fumbling for words. Shouldn't have gone scentless today.
Damn straight.
Bakugou bit out, his teeth catching briefly along Kirishima's jawline.
Wanna fucking smell you.
Sorry. Kirishima gasped out. I won't take scent neutralizers tomorrow.
You better not.
Bakugou growled in his ear, and shit, did that ever do things to Ichiro. He arched his back unconsciously, gasping as Bakugou shifted in his lap to straddle him.
So,
Bakugou murmured into Ichiro's ear.
When does that first reserve visitation start? Because I have fucking plans for that shit.
Oh my god. Ichiro whimpered, which admittedly wasn't really an answer to Bakugou's question, but it seemed to satisfy him anyway.